I'm Bob Brill. He's Eric Kramer. Welcome to Kramer and Brill, an NFL podcast and videocast. Each week we take a look at what's going on in the NFL, and during the season we analyze your fantasy picks. Now this week we're taking a look at the changing Chicago Bears. My esteemed colleague is former NFL quarterback Eric Kramer, who provides his valuable insights to the process. And of course, Eric was the Bears quarterback for several years and still holds many of the Bears passing records, right?
Yes. Right. What few there are. Yeah.
Our guest today is Brad Biggs, who covers the Bears for the Chicago Tribune. Brad, welcome to the show.
Thanks, guys. Yeah, it's some of those Bears passing records have been in place a long time, an awful long time. And Eric's the ones he doesn't hold, he's got good standing in a lot of those categories.
Well, it was a couple of years ago when Trubisky was drafted, I asked him, I said, so when he breaks your passing records, are you going to go back and be there for the game that he breaks them? And I forget exactly what he said, but it was like, yeah, only if he buys me dinner and a ticket. So, and of course, that never happened. So,
Yeah. Well, I just, me personally, I don't know about you, Brad, but I just think that what's going on now, it's kind of quietly, to me anyway, it's kind of a quiet foundation building. Nothing exciting to me has happened so far in terms of any big splash moves, but I like the foundation that the Bears have decided to build here and giving what seems to be Ryan Poles some autonomy. And Coach Eberflus has, got a very good reputation in terms of being a defensive-minded coach. And I just think what they've done in so far, kind of quietly building for the future, dropping some heavy contracts, and drafting for the foundation of the team, not necessarily star power at this point. I think they've all been good moves.
Yeah, it's a process, Eric, and I think people who are looking for immediate returns and maybe signs of progress in the win-loss column are probably looking at the wrong thing. I mean, it's going to take time. When you have a new regime come in place and they're going to completely kind of rebuild the roster, I think you're talking about an 18-month process, and that's a clock that starts when the new regime comes on board, right? But I think the roster, when they kick off the 2023 season, is going to look dramatically different than the one that this group inherited back in January. They've already made a slew of moves, right? And they were short on draft capital. When they got started, they did not have a first-round draft pick. So I think you've seen a change on defense, like you said, in terms of dropping some really big contracts with some shifts made toward a new scheme, okay, going from a 34 to this sort of Tampa 2-based defense. It's going to require different personnel at a number of positions. You've seen them overhaul some positions on the offense, and that's only going to continue. People talk about, well, when's the roster going to be set? The idea that a roster's set in the NFL is that's fantasy land. They are constantly evaluating, constantly looking for other pieces, parts that could come in, guys that could be camp bodies, guys that could challenge for a spot on the back half of the roster, guys that they believe can be developed over a period of time. So they've got some younger players now. They had one of the very oldest rosters in the league last year. It's going to be significantly younger this season, and they brought in so many new guys. Not all these guys are going to hit, right? Half of them aren't going to hit. But boy, if they can get some of these guys that are signed on 1 and 2 year deals to play well, you're going to look at them and you're going to say, hey, this could be a piece for the future. And when I say the future, you're talking 23, 24, maybe 25. And so it's just going to take some time. I think it's going to require a bit of patience and certainly some luck. You're going to need to stay healthy. You're going to need to see, and this isn't luck, but you're going to need to see the quarterback make some advancements, a quarterback that they inherited, that they feel pretty good about right now, but a guy that hasn't played for them in the new system, that the coordinator that's gotten high marks from people that have worked with him before, Luke Getsy, is going to have his hands on.
Well, the Bears have always been known as a dominant defensive team, maybe not so much last year, but they went right in the draft the first couple of picks on defensive players. And from what I'm hearing you say, it seems to be that they are they starting with the defense and building that first because defense wins championships or whatever the scheme. Doing that first and then letting the offense come together on its own.
Yeah, I mean they had needs across the board. They had some real needs in the secondary. They were very thin at corner last year, and you've got a defensive-minded head coach. So as much as you want to build around the quarterback, I think you've got to give the defensive head coach some players, some foundational pieces that he can feel good about. So they go with a corner, Kyler Gordon, with their first pick in round 2, and then they come back later in round 2 with Jaquan Brisker, a safety out of Penn State, who I think could be a good player. The Bears have had, I've been covering them for more than 20 years now. They've had an awful lot of success with young drafted safeties, and Brisker's the highest drafted safety they've had since Daniel Manning. You got to go all the way back to 2006 for that. And they were poor as a pass defense last season, despite being in the top, I want to say 3 or 5, certainly in the top 5 in sacks last year. You look at that sack production and you're like, this is really good, but it didn't necessarily translate into consistent pass defense. So they upgrade themselves in the secondary with a couple of draft picks. I think they had hoped to do more on the offensive line. Ryan Poles talked about that, kind of getting that right when he was hired. They threw volume at it though, guys. 4 day 3 draft picks on the offensive line. So guys that were round 5 or later, and you're kind of getting lottery tickets. That's sort of what I described late round picks on the offensive line as. You're hoping as you scratch those suckers off, you got 1 or 2 that you can take back to the convenience store and collect some cash, right? So if they can get a couple of those guys to pan out, that would help them out. Again, I think that's down the road, although they've had one rookie 5th round pick, Braxton Jones, left tackle out of Southern Utah. So he's coming from a lower level. He spent about half of the offseason program with the first team at left tackle. As everyone knows out there, you really can't evaluate offensive line play until the pads go on. So that's going to be a storyline worth tracking when training camp starts in late July.
Yeah, Brad, just thinking, I remember back when the draft was about to happen and Bob and I were talking, and I was saying that just in terms of a mentality, you'd love to have a roster full of mentalities like David Montgomery. The guy, I don't care if they're 50 above or 50 behind. The guy runs with a reckless abandon that you'd love to everybody to play their position like that. And the more you can develop that or draft that or acquire that, I think that's, to me, that's the mentality of where this team is headed eventually. And, I was part of another podcast a couple times last year based on the Bears, and they had access to basically what amounts to coach's video, right? And I was just seeing at many positions, offense and defense, like they were so poorly coached. It was almost like grade school level. And you have Roquan Smith running into the same gap that the defensive tackle, took the easy way into himself. And just offensively and defensively, and I think just coaching wise, it's got to be better. Cole Kmet, he he probably learned in college, don't run right down the middle of the field and cover two. You're kind of running yourself into the backside safety. And I don't know. I think from an organizational standpoint, I think Ryan Pauls, to me, is going to build himself some autonomy, and it's no longer going to be the Ted Phillips / next McCaskian line making their personnel moves. And I just think the coaching itself will be better. And I think, like you said, they've kind of gotten rid of some contracts, but the key people they still have are very good foundational, fundamentally sound players.
Right, and they're guys with a lot to prove, Eric. You talk about any of these younger veterans, and you mentioned Montgomery, who's going to be going into year 4, and Komet going into year 3. They've got a ton to prove, right? They've got a ton to prove to a brand new coaching staff that they've got to work for, or one of the other 31 teams, right? I mean, so it's a new opportunity for them, and so I think. Based on that, it's brought a higher level of energy to the building. And I think that's natural in most situations where you have a total regime change, right? They didn't keep a single position coach from the previous staff. And there were some solid coaches on that staff, but everybody is new. So there's no comfort level with, well, I've worked with this position coach. It's a new scheme, but I know what he's looking for. I know what it's like when he's pushing buttons to get me going and that type of thing. It's all brand new. And so it's been described to me as the new people in charge are very intense about going about their job. And so I think that is only going to make the players intense when they show up to start camp. I mean, heck, they got docked the day of minicamp for too much contact in the offseason program when they were maybe rounding some of the corners with some of those rules. So we know that they've been getting after it a little bit, but just a lot of work to do. And as I said earlier, I mean, this is a process. And I think as a former player, you probably understand that what we see kickoff weekend in September is going to look different after Halloween, and it should look different even more as the holidays approach. They will get better. They'll have a better understanding of the system, of what they're being asked to do. And, with some good coaching and like I said, some good fortune in terms of injuries, maybe they can battle. I think the schedule as a whole is a little bit easier than it was a year ago. And it's very difficult to forecast those things before we see how other rosters shake out and injuries impact other teams. And, it's oftentimes it's not who you play or as I should say, maybe as much it's when you play a team in terms of anything else. When are you catching a good opponent on your schedule on a short week when they've got 3 key starters on defense down? You're catching them at the right time then. So it has raised the energy level in the building, and I think fans sense that a little bit. But again, it's a process.
Everybody, and I'm sure the buzz back there is still about offense, even though they're building the defense. So and the social media and everything. I guess my big question is Justin Fields the guy?
Well, I mean that's the $1 million question, and I think it's going to be for a while, and he's going to need to prove it for a staff that the only thing they've got invested in Justin Fields right now is time, right? Mm-hmm. They didn't draft him, and so what Bears fans are holding out hope for here, guys, is that the former GM Ryan Pace and the former coach Matt Nagy were right about getting Justin Fields, and they were basically wrong about everything else with the offense. That's sort of the needle that Bears fans are hoping the organization can thread. They've talked about trying to play to his strengths and that type of thing. Luke Getsy comes from the Green Bay Packers, and I think he's probably smart enough to know that he can't do everything with Justin Fields that the Packers do on a week in and week out basis with Aaron Rodgers, right? I mean, to compare Fields or any other year 2 quarterback to Aaron Rodgers would be a massive mistake. But you find what he does well. I think you take advantage of his unique athletic traits, and you hope that some of these wide receivers that people don't know a ton about can take a step forward and help him out. Darnell Mooney went for 1,000 yards last season. He's a player Bears fans know well. Maybe fans around the league aren't is up to speed on him, but they're hoping he can be even better. They bring in Byron Pringle from the Kansas City Chiefs, who he's in an interesting spot in his career because he was productive with the opportunities he had in Kansas City. He's going to have a lot more opportunities with the Bears. So can he elevate his game with more opportunities? The thing is, when he was in Kansas City, when Pringle's on the field, the opposing defense is saying, okay, well, we're really worried about Kelsey here and Tyreek Hill's over there. And so we're concerned about them. And so Pringle's not getting the top coverage on every snap. And then a guy that's interesting to me, because when you just look at the size, the measurables, the speed, all those types of things, Equanimous St. Brown, who the coordinator Getsy should know well from Green Bay, he's in the mix now. Now, he could never consistently put himself in position to make plays on a regular basis for the Packers. Part of that is a super demanding veteran quarterback. Part of that was St. Brown wasn't healthy all the time. But, boy, you look at him, he's tall. He's got a huge catch radius. He can fly down the field. Like I said, he's one of those unknown guys on a one-year contract where if it works out, you're saying, hey, they've got something here. If not, you move on and you haven't really lost anything. But he's interesting. And then Bellis Jones, the third-round pick from Tennessee, is just, with shorts on and the spring guys, he looks ultra dynamic with the combination of speed, ability to move laterally, to cut, those types of things. He should be a dangerous return man from the get-go. And then it's just kind of feeding him stuff on offense. You don't want to put too much on his plate. I'm sure Eric's seen this. I've certainly seen this. You get some wide receivers, and it's changed a little bit. I think it's become a little bit easier for them to get into the league. But 10, 20 years ago, maybe when Eric played, that transition that those college wide receivers had to make to the NFL was really a challenging one. And I think when coaches and teams asked rookies at that position to do too much right away, they just overloaded them with information and they were kind of paralyzed. You never saw them play fast. You're like, wait a minute, this guy was 4.4, 4.3. It doesn't look like he's playing fast. And I think it's because they were thinking too much. It's gotten a little bit easier for guys at those positions. But I think with Bellis in particular, give him a little bit, let him master that, let him show, okay, he can do this and he can do it well. Then give him a little bit more and just keep feeding him more as he sort of digests what you're putting on his plate. But he will be an interesting skill position player for Justin Fields to keep an eye on.
Yeah, I think this is Brad. I started coaching high school football. It's the third time I've done it now. It's only been 3 seasons in total, but I started coaching quarterbacks this year at a school, and I was talking to the offensive coordinator when I first met him, and I said, what you really want is a fundamental. You want to build some fundamentals within all the players within a fundamental system, and if you go about things in a slowed down process as much as possible and build from there, it's amazing what you can put together in a short amount of time. I know this is the NFL and I know, but they're no different. The learning curve is no different for them than it is anyone else. And when you're talking about receivers, it's not about speed as much as it is about footwork and body posture and taking your time with getting off releases. You could be 4.2, but not know how to take your time at the line of scrimmage. And you can't get off a jam. And I see it with high school players. If you can slow it all down, then all of a sudden in a week, all of a sudden things look better. And Same with quarterbacks. And just learning how to read coverages and getting your body posture correctly in line with your feet, having your feet and eyes move through the progression. It sounds simple enough, but it's something you do have to practice a bunch. And to me, I saw Justin Fields last year in the preseason games do things I didn't think he would necessarily do that early. So I think, to me, if you get the pieces around him, meaning the offensive line, and you get that fundamental system, which I don't know what offense they're running, but I imagine since Getsy's come from the Packers, it's a pretty much West Coast offense-based system. And there's no better, like pretty much everyone is now, and there's no better system to me than that one. And I think over time that will play itself out. And as you said, you have contracts, you have drafts to deal with, but I think the fundamentals of the game still are the fundamentals of the game. And the more people that you have offensive line, just speaking offensively, if they can execute their fundamentals and the system itself is fundamentally sound, you got a pretty good combination there.
Yeah, and they've got questions on the offensive line, and hopefully they will find positive answers during training camp and preseason. But you look at left tackle as a question mark right now. Right guard is a bit of a question, and then I think the left tackle decision will influence the decision they ultimately make at right tackle. So you're talking about 60% of the offensive line. You're not sure exactly who's going to be where yet. So boy, you get to whatever it is now, day 3, day 4 camp, when they put those pads on, it's going to be interesting to keep an eye on that group, who's with what unit on this day and how often they rotate them. And they won't make a decision by August 1, and they might not have one by August 21. But they ought to be, if they're not close to answers by August 21, then you might be in for a long season.
We have tremendous fun with St. Brown last year when he was playing. I mean, it was like every week he was just going off. Once he hit a stride, it was like, and we just had great fun with the guy's name, first of all. I was like, how did you pronounce it?
Figured out how to spell the first. I've got the first name down now. Like I the first 20 times I wrote it, I'd have to Google to make sure I spelled it. Now I feel confident, like I can type it out and not have to look it up. So or you just, and if you're on the radio, you just call him St. Brown or ESB.
There you go. Oh, like Odell Beckham.
OBJ, right?
Yeah. Well, they finished 6 wins last year, 3rd in the division. 3 of the 4 teams were under 500. Green Bay was the only team over 500. You look at starting out this season, where do you see are they going to improve on 6 wins? Are they going to get to 8, or you think they're still right around 6?
I mean, if I had to put a number on it right now, I'd say 6 sounds about right to me. Can they be better than that? Sure. If Getsy and Justin Fields kind of have a synergy that they can grow off of, if some of these receivers end up being better than you take a look at some of these rankings, NFL wide receiver groups, the Bears are going to be in the bottom 4 probably, no matter who's putting together a list. If these guys can prove to be better than that, if the defense can step up, could they get to 8, 9? Sure. Again, I look at the teams they're playing, and I look at the opponent quarterbacks they have to face, because so much of this is a quarterback-driven league, right? And they had to go through a gauntlet of elite quarterbacks a year ago, and there are some on the schedule this season. Obviously, they got to play the guy in Green Bay, Aaron Rodgers, twice a year. Everybody knows that. Yeah. Josh Allen is on the list this year. He's supremely talented. That is a high-octane offense that Buffalo has. But there aren't as many Pro Bowl caliber quarterbacks that they have to face this year. So if they can make some gains offensively, if they can answer the questions that they have on the offensive line, sure, they could be better than 6. Are they going to challenge into late January? I think that would be a stunner to most people who follow this team closely. But right now I would say 6 is about right. But I sure as heck wouldn't put a ceiling at 6 or 7, because there's just so much unknown with a completely new staff and very much a younger roster than they had in place a year ago.
Eric, you have any final thoughts?
Yeah, well, I was going to ask Brad, just since you've been around this, they've had a mini camp now and they've started their off-season program. Is there any sense amongst the players that things are, at least at this point of time, moving in the right direction as opposed to what they've been in the recent past?
Yeah, I think so. I think so, because I think, number one, players realized before the end of last year that major change was going to be coming. Okay, so they're looking forward to that because they want to be better. They want to be part of something that is stronger and more successful. So the new people come in. You need to hear the message, right? What are they pitching? What are they selling? What are they asking me to do? What is my role going to be? And again, that intensity that the coaching staff, the front office has had through the building, I think that's already trickled down to the locker room, to the roster. So yeah, I think there's buy-in. You see what does a new regime do? They go out and they get a bunch of new players and they earmark a handful of those moves to be players that they have a history with. So you talk about players that Poles was with or around in Kansas City. You talk about players that Eberflus has been with in Indianapolis or Dallas, where he was at before, and because they understand the system, they understand what's going to be asked of them. They can emerge as potential leaders. You got to see how that dynamic plays out in the locker room. Just because a guy has a history with a coach doesn't mean he's going to be a leader in his new place, but he's certainly going to be able to show people, hey, this is the expectation that the coaches are going to have. So, yeah, I think there's buy-in from the players. They've talked about improving the chemistry. That's kind of this corporate jargon that I don't get into a whole lot. You know who has good chemistry in the National Football League?
Winning
teams with good
right.
winning teams. Yeah. If you're 6-11, guess what? Your chemistry is, you've got 6-win chemistry. Okay. Right. If you go 8-9, 9-8, your chemistry is middle of the road. It could be worse. Kind of needs to be better. So they've talked about better chemistry. I don't buy that, because you're ultimately your chemistry is what your record. It's the Bill Parcells saying: you are what your record says you are. Right? So keep in mind it's a process. This roster is going to continue to be overhauled. This is a team that could be very busy in early September when roster cuts are made around the league. They could pluck 5-6 guys from other teams that have been let go and bring them in. And it's not going to stop. It's not going to stop. They're going to be basically whole with their draft capital next year. They're going to have a ton of financial flexibility in 2023 when you talk about the salary cap. Ownership is going to allow them to spend as they need to spend. So, yeah, there's reason for optimism for Bears fans. Don't expect this team to be chasing a Super Bowl trophy this coming season, but maybe see what the quarterback can do. And some of these younger players, 27 and younger on the roster, can they make themselves known as a guy that can be counted on moving forward?
I want to thank our guest, Brad Biggs of the Chicago Tribune. That'll do it for another edition of Kramer and Brill. Don't forget to join us next time wherever you get your shows and on my Bob Brill YouTube channel. For my friend and colleague, Eric Kramer, we'll see you next time.